The companies are post-consumer. They do not need you right now. Private equity and these large companies want to make sure that you not only rent your home and lease your car, but subscribe to your computer. Data center and AI greed has gone beyond simply fucking consumers and instead is now intent on fucking humanity, with things like the Palantir partnership, with things like the focus on military applications of AI, because apparently there's not enough money in the private sector. We need to go extract it from the Pentagon as well. These large companies can outbid anybody anytime. This isn't a gaming computer problem. This isn't a DIY enthusiast build PCs problem. This is an everybody problem. Nvidia's in the news for rumors we've corroborated with industry sources that it intends to cut consumer GeForce GPU production by 30 to 40% next year, yielding to enterprise GPU sales. And as usual, it's the normal people who get economically fucked while these mega corporations get into bed with each other and with governments to leech the market dry and sequester away computing power into the cloud so that they can lease it back to you later. And this comes at a time when costs are going up for Nvidia's GPU subscription program, ensuring that you'll pay for a new flagship GPU every 5 years, whether you actually get to own it or not at the end of that. We think the mega corporations and private equity are slowly pushing for computers to go the way of the housing market, with the end goal being that you'll own nothing and you'll subscribe to everything, right down to your computer. Nvidia sold 600,000 GPUs to Saudi Arabia's Humane, led by Mohammed bin Salman, and part of the same PIF group that partnered with Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner to buy EA Games. 60,000 Nvidia GPUs went to the UAE via Microsoft, and Nvidia is planning to allocate 1.3 million GPUs to Meta AI for a data center large enough to cover most of Manhattan. Then there's 300,000 GPUs to Nscale, with 60,000 in the UK, 50,000 GPUs to SK Hynix, 50,000 GPUs to Samsung, 200,000 GPUs to Elon Musk's xAI, with a roadmap to sell them 1 million total GPUs, 400,000 GPUs to Oracle, 10 gigawatts of Nvidia systems for OpenAI, or over 2 times the power capacity of the largest nuclear power plant in the United States, with millions of GPUs, more than 100,000 GPUs in the immediate future for Microsoft, and even 100,000 GPUs to the United States Department of Energy. The last one, of course, funded by taxpayers, who will ultimately foot the bill for the cost of the GPUs, the cost of the power consumption, the cost of the grid upfit, and the cost of the land use, getting fucked over in ways more than just the cost of the computer. So with these deals between governments and companies, it's pretty clear that Nvidia would rather sell over 1 million GPUs to Mark Zuckerberg rather than 1 million GPUs to 1 million end users. And that's not a surprise, but what is interesting is that Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang has seemingly shifted his interest towards the military-industrial complex instead, meaning that he's removed his hand out of the ass of the White House and extended it to shake the hand of the Pentagon.
Well, I'm happy that our military is going to use AI technology for defense.
We also know that national security and economic security and economic prosperity go hand in hand. The wealthier our nation, the more we can fund the mightiest military on the planet, so that we can continue to be the mightiest technology industry in the world, so that we can fund the mightiest military in the world. And all of that, I think, goes hand in hand.
I'm happy that we're making it more socially acceptable. You know, there was a time when somebody wanted to channel their technology capability and their intellect into defense technology, somehow they're vilified.
That's right. Vilified somehow. For some reason, the people who design AI system usage for killing people are vilified.
Come with me if you want to live.
And if you want to learn more about that particular topic, you can check out our latest GNCA video that is on the Palantir and Nvidia relationship, which is shady in a number of other ways. When he's not busy with his latest multiplayer affair with the Warhawks, Jensen Huang is busy testing the theory of the inverse Kramer and driving number up for Wall Street. Roll 212.
I always like it when we give a keynote, everybody's stock price goes up.
Stargate will consume 40% of the global DRAM supply. Nvidia is set to consume 77% of the AI wafer allocation. Nvidia's 2027 HBM bit demand is projected to consume more than the entirety of the 2025 HBM demand, and the wafer area, factoring in lower yield of HBM plus allocation to interposer wafers, will further squeeze users of consumer devices. Nvidia's close partner Micron has abandoned consumers while raking in billions of dollars from those same consumers via tax breaks and government subsidies, boasting a 257% growth in cloud-based memory revenue from hyperscalers and from Nvidia, while also increasing its operating margin in its mobile and client business to 47% from 15% year over year in fiscal quarter 1, 2026. Because they weren't making enough on you already, so they've altered the deal. pray that they don't alter it further. And so AI bus driver Jensen Huang can cooperate with memory manufacturers like Micron to further crush the end user underfoot and line the pockets of the trillionaire tech companies and the billionaire tech CEOs. All at a time when the average person has seen a wage growth increase in November of 0.1% and an annual wage growth increase of 3.5%, only 0.5 percentage points outpacing inflation, stacked with the highest unemployment rate in 4 years. But it's not all bad. Gaming companies are saying they might have to optimize their video games more than they wanted to account for the memory pricing. So, good. That's good. We'll still have video games to play while the world is plunged into a dystopic AI surveillance darkness, the likes of which we've never seen before, but Larian's gonna optimize their next game more than they wanted to. It's time to talk about what's going on with the memory industry and Nvidia, and this time, the what that we want to uncover specifically is the fuck. We brought you this installment to our AI Dystopia series of video coverage as part of our Kickstarter-style AI Dystopia series support campaign on store.gamersnexus.net. The series focuses on global surveillance, tech company overreach, and anti-consumer behavior. As part of the support campaign, you can get signed versions of our GN15 mouse mats for one of the tiers, the new redacted GN logo glassware with a nucleation base for our Dystopia smiley, themed around our Vaporwave smiley t-shirt, a new sticker pack with a throwback to all of a few months ago when we got Bloomberged for our latest investigative series, and even a copyright strike t-shirt. This is our latest Kickstarter-style fundraiser to help fuel our deep dive research and upcoming travel investigations. Alongside this series, we also launched our brand new 3D rubberized coaster packs with a retro I/O design, included an old school PC case front panel with 5 1/4 bays, retro colorway controller, and more. We just recently signed a new batch of GN Inductor E-Waste dice boxes for the autographed tier, so if you're into tabletop gaming, consider our high-quality sharp-edge resin dice with copper coil E-Waste inductors embedded within them. These are color-matched with the copper-colored text on the dice and a goblin creature token card with a scrapper goblin, cobbling together the best weapons he can. We also have our Snowflake the Cat dice kit with tiny Snowflake the Cats embedded in each of the 7 included dice and a Snowflake trading card that actually my mom painted the design for. Each kit comes with 7 dice, an included box with integrated roll tray, random treasure generator card, and a playing card. Autographed versions are also available in the drop-down. Head over to store.gamersnexus.net to support this series of AI Dystopia coverage. Let's get back into it. The GPU price situation and the memory price situation are directly tied to each other. Right now, the GPU prices have been improving for completed cards, but each GPU has memory attached to it. And the memory prices, as you all know, have been skyrocketing, where in fact, if you bought memory back in August or late July and you sold it today, it is possibly the best investment you have ever made in your life. That's how fast it's multiplied. The big 3 memory makers, meanwhile, are all increasing HBM production for GPUs. Likewise, servers have their own need for RAM, and it's measured in hundreds of gigabytes to terabytes. For some context, GN spoke with a respected industry insider and analyst who actually is familiar to the audience, but we can't name the person because of their association with some of these companies, and the individual told us this. Quote, the capacity for regular DDR memory, a big chunk of that has been allocated to HBM or has been allocated to server-oriented applications. For instance, if you look at Grace Blackwell, the host CPU needs a giant pile of LPDDR. That LPDDR is no longer available for other markets, like the mobile market. That mostly inflates prices. This is going to fuck Intel. For Intel and AMD specifically, it's very good that memory is cheap, end quote. Now, whether or not the rumor that was posted online in the past week is specifically true down to the individual percentage points, we did speak with some system integrators and some add-in board partners, or AIBs, sometimes called AICs, to try and corroborate the information. And what we did learn is that the companies are forecasting cost increases associated with obtaining video cards and GPUs in 2026, with some vendors noting that they've been informed of reduced supply availability of Nvidia GeForce GPUs for the next year, lining up with the rumors that have been posted online, with the exception of the specific percentage change for GPU availability and the reduction in supply. The latest news comes from Chinese board partner forum Bantang, which was reported on by BenchLife, and the report states that Nvidia will cut supply of GeForce GPUs by 30 to 40% 40% in the first half of 2026. The report refers to memory shortages, with the rumor indicating that Nvidia is attempting to adjust production of GeForce GPUs to account for memory shortages. The report suggests that this isn't about only GPU VRAM, but also about the shortage of consumer sticks of RAM used in retail motherboards. According to BenchLife, cutting GPU supply will adjust for the lack of affordable consumer system memory, which will create a feedback loop, boosting the prices of both. And again, regardless of that specific rumor that was posted online, in speaking with, after that, our own system integrator and add-in board partners, it sounds like there's at least truth to the premise that GPU supply might potentially see more constraints in 2026, which can drive up prices, largely attached to the memory situation because all of the video cards have memory on them. Benchlife.info received its own tips as well from add-in board partners, stating that Nvidia's prioritization will be toward the 5070 Ti and the 5060 Ti 16GB GPUs. This follows rumors about a month ago that Nvidia would stop bundling GPU VRAM with GPU silicon, meaning that partners would be on their own to source memory supply. Partners won't have as much quantity leverage as Nvidia, which can lead to another feedback loop of increased prices, particularly for smaller board partners and smaller laptop partners that would struggle to get not only competitive pricing, but access as compared to the largest incumbents like Asus and Nvidia itself for its FE cards, since it has bulk pricing benefits for its enterprise cards too. All of this contributes to a stall in consumer GPU pricing recovery. We ran a piece 2 weeks ago entitled GPU Prices Crater Before Inevitable Opportunity to Screw Consumers. And today I present to you, not proudly, Inevitable Opportunity to Screw Consumers. In that piece, we showed that for the first time this year, GPU prices had finally hit a downward trend for consumers. This was just as the DRAM shortage ramped to hit consumers the hardest. GPU MSRP is still elevated above what's reasonable overall, but cards other than the RTX 5090, which stands alone in its class, have come down in price over the course of the year. Our data for late November showed that in-stock listings at MSRP for GPU models had increased substantially from 13 in June to 58 in late November. For all listings in stock, we saw an increase from 135 to 171 models on Newegg. Strictly for in-stock average price listings, we also previously aggregated data that showed a drawdown in GPU pricing, with the 9070 XT falling from $837 to $655 on average, the 5070 Ti falling from $951 to $821, the B580 falling from $343 to $264, and the RTX 5080 falling from $1,514 to $1,359. The only card in this table that went up on average was the one with the most VRAM and the one that has the least competitors, which is 0, and that's the RTX 5090. The 5090 is not only uncontested, but it's useful in AI, and it also is strapped with the highest VRAM capacity out of all these cards, which means it'll be the most immediately sensitive to memory pricing changes. That GPU's price increased from $3,049 to $3,102 on average against a $2,000 MSRP advertised. Our charts from that piece also looked at the cheapest 4 in-stock models per GPU variation, then plotted the data for price over MSRP on average. Most cards were slightly below or were at MSRP for their cheapest 4 in stock, with the 5080 and 5090 above, with the 5090's 4 cheapest in stock models averaging $1,103 over MSRP, or an increase of about 55%. That's data that we pulled only a few weeks ago, and now looking at what our own sources at SIs and AIB partners are saying, plus BenchLife's, plus the Bolbantan forum sources, it looks like Nvidia could be cutting GPU supply just in time to kneecap the consumer price downtrend and benefit for consumers and keep it elevated for pricing. This allows Nvidia to shift its focus and keep supply of both memory and GPU silicon in the enterprise and data center world, and now in the military industrial complex, per Jensen Huang's new and disturbing obsession with AI applications for the military, which again for some reason are vilified, nobody knows why. Looking at PC part picker price trends, the bearer of the highest memory capacity, the RTX 5090, has actually started already to see price creep upwards again in just the last 2 weeks. The rest of the cards, fortunately, are still showing that slow downward trend, but we don't know if that's going to continue. Data center GPUs largely run on HBM, or high bandwidth memory, but the cost of a lot of different types of memory are directly tied to GPU utilization of its own memory supply, both HBM and not. That includes DRAM pricing for DRAM that you'd put in a motherboard as being directly tied to GPU utilization of memory supply. Completed video cards and GPUs cost not only the wafer area to make the graphics processor itself, but also the wafer area to make associated silicon components. That include VRAM, like HBM or GDDR memory, but also silicon often derived from TSMC wafers used to make interposers that HBM tends to sit on top of. Every GPU sold has memory attached to it. For now. I mean, they'd like to sell you a 0 gigabyte RTX 6060 Ti, but for now, they all have memory. Just for GPUs alone, a reported Morgan Stanley analysis posted on Twitter from February of this year suggested that Nvidia would consume 77% of AI wafer allocation. The total AI wafer consumption was valued at up to $14.5 billion. Nvidia's consumption increased from 51% in the prior year, with AMD, AWS, and Google declining in the 2025 estimate. Nvidia is also now one of the largest consumers of memory supply just in general.
We work with every single memory vendor now. We have 3 different sources, 3 gigantic sources of really complicated memory.
The GPUs you're looking at right now use HBM, or high bandwidth memory. HBM has been used on consumer cards in the past sparingly, mostly in failures by AMD, but these days it's most commonly found on data center GPUs. The name gives away its higher bandwidth benefit. The value of HBM is obvious for tasks that are memory intensive, and particularly that are bandwidth intensive, like training for AI tasks. Memory is made using silicon wafers, just like the ones we saw in Intel's fab for its CPUs previously. Wafer supply is limited, largely due to the amount of machines available to actually process those wafers, and now that is more true than ever that OpenAI has claimed 40% of the world's entire memory supply for itself. As for what they'll use that supply for, other than further consolidating power and memory supply into data centers to then lease it back to you in some capacity, we assume that it'll be to power ChatGPT's erotica fan nonfiction, where all the corporate tech CEOs form a giant circle around consumers for their annual circle. Because wafers, or more specifically, wafer processing capabilities are finite, the wafer allocation for business enterprise is shared with the wafer allocation for consumer. They are one and the same before they get processed into something, but it's worse than just the fact that this is all shared with a group that can outbid you. Data centers typically use GPUs that utilize HBM, which can require more wafer area when considering all factors for the memory produced than with GDDR7. Now that is specifically factoring in things like yield losses. Gartner HBM forecast report author Shrish Pant, in an interview with Tech Target, provided context on HBM's die area cost. Quote, "You will need a much bigger die to produce a similar gigabyte of HBM chip," end quote. Citing Pant, the publication wrote, quote, "The larger die is needed due to the process of through silicon via," end quote, manufacturing, we'd assume. Citing Jim Handy, the general director and semiconductor analyst at Objective Analysis, Tech Target quoted Handy as saying, quote, "The wafer costs more and it produces less than half to have as many chips," end quote, comparing that to non-HBM solutions. Speaking to some of our own sources and technical analysis, we learned that you would need around 2.3 to 3x the DRAM die area for X gigabits of HBM as compared to something like GDDR7, where X is just whatever the capacity is. You would also need a base logic die and an interposer for HBM, so there's additional silicon wafer cost beyond the die area for the DRAM. OpenAI's wafer use would consume 900,000 wafer starts per month by 2029, spread across Samsung and Hynix, which would equal about double the current global monthly HBM production, according to a statement from SK Group chairman Che Tae-wan, quoted by Reuters. SK Group here, of course, being related to SK Hynix. Now, we also know experts in the industry, so we went to speak with some of our own sources to just try and cross-verify this information that was in these various reports. The SK Hynix stuff, probably pretty damn good information. They are the direct supplier. Some of these other quotes, though, they come from third-party external analysts. It's quoted by another publication. They've stripped the quotation directly and they've paraphrased it. So we did some of our own research and speaking with a mix of people at GPU manufacturers and external third-party analysts. Can't name any of them because their association with these companies and what we're saying in this report. But we found some conflicting information on the specific die area cost and wafer area cost of HBM. But we did find a general consensus that for total wafer area allocation and cost, factoring in all associated wafer cost needs to make HBM products, that should generally be higher than, or higher wafer supply and machine time consumption than GDDR7, for example. And so one of our contacts informed us that, actually two of them, informed us that the bit cell area cost should be similar between HBM and GDDR in terms of area cost, but noted that the increased losses from yields, largely due to complicated stacking, and some potentially higher I/O area cost per bit, that is, and the need for a base die with HBM contributes to that increased wafer area cost for HBM versus something like consumer GDDR7 memory. One analyst who wished not to be named because he performs work with these companies told us, quote, HBM is significantly more costly in every sense of the word than GDDR. And that's why GDDR is used in client systems. HBM has lower power, it's more reliable, it's better for ECC, there's a lot to like, except for the cost, end quote. Not all silicon components of HBM come from the memory foundry wafer supply either. Some of that will come from other vendors, like potentially TSMC, for the interposer that everything sits on top of. We asked the analyst about interposer costs, and the insider noted to us that the cost to make the interposers isn't as high as something as advanced as a GPU, maybe obviously, but still consumes wafer supply. Quote, consumer DRAM is designed to be as cheap as possible, but HBM not so much. As for the interposers, they're going to be from TSMC. The input wafer is probably the same. The input wafer might be $50 to $100 maybe. The expensive part is EUV, or extreme ultraviolet lithography. Do you use EUV to make GPUs? Sure do. Do you use EUV to make interposers? Abso-fucking-lutely not. End quote. That's my kind of quote. Like all manufacturing, wafers have a certain percent yield, or the amount of good products that are yielded out of the input supply, which is the wafer. And so going through the entire fab process, some of the yield losses are due to natural manufacturing issues. You might have things like cross-contamination of metals. Maybe copper got in where it's not supposed to and sort of poisoned it. Could be oxidation, could be patterning issues, and so on. We talk about these in our Intel Fab Tour video in depth if you want to learn more. And in particular, larger die area products like data center GPUs with massive dies or things with HBM, which are just more complex to make, they have a higher chance of a failure due to too many things going wrong somewhere in the chip where it just fails. Now, some of this can be salvaged as a downbin part. You see this in consumer all the time, but that's kind of a different topic. TechTarget's article also cited IDC analyst Jeff Janakovich, who stated, quote, HBM will have several packages. So if I have yield loss at the DRAM level, then a little bit of yield loss at the packaging level, rather than throwing away one chip, I could be throwing away 4, end quote. Industry analyst firm TrendForce, which tracks memory prices, published a report in 2024 that indicated HBM, quote, not only boosts bit demand, but also raises the industry's average price, end quote. TrendForce more recently ran a report just a couple months ago that noted all 3 major memory suppliers will be making HBM4 in 2026. The firm published a chart showing the distribution of bit consumption. Bits are the unit of measurement for memory supply, with that chart being overwhelmingly assigned to Nvidia. The inner circle shows the 2025 supply being split between Nvidia, AMD, and ASICs, or task-specific dedicated processing devices. In 2026, TrendForce is projecting an increase in ASIC consumption of HBM bit demand, but still high Nvidia demand. Back to TechTarget's report, analyst Jim Handy was credited with citing Nvidia and other hyperscalers as driving HBM bit demand. Semi-Analysis said this of HBM, quote, despite the rapid rise of custom ASICs, Nvidia will still command the lion's share of HBM demand in 2027, driven by its aggressive roadmap where Rubin Ultra alone pushes per GPU capacity to 1 terabyte, end quote. This semi-analysis chart also suggests that HBM bit demand for Nvidia in 2027 is projected to exceed literally the entirety of all HBM bit demand by all companies in 2025. That memory supply is going to come from somewhere, and it's mostly going to be from you. We're going to make some assumptions here to make a point just with something. There are assumptions in this, just to be clear about that. We're doing the physics thing. We are assuming a spherical cow for our math here. If we assume, I mean, it's really no different than Jensen Huang's CEO math that he does on stage. All right, if we assume a memory wafer supply constraint rather than a GPU wafer supply constraint, and if we assume a like-for-like GPU memory type, such as just GDDR7, no other HBM considerations here, at an identical density per chip, all right? There's a lot of assumptions, and I'll walk through why some of these don't work this way, but we assume all that stuff. A 96 gigabyte GPU with GDDR7, for example, that is intended for business enterprise usage would be produced at a rate of 1 to 6 16 gigabyte consumer GPUs, ignoring the GPU itself. The GPU itself also consumes less die area, yields better, you can make a lot more of those. But in other words, for every 6 cards worth of 16 gigabyte GPUs by memory capacity alone, assuming the same type of memory and the same density, you would get one 96 gigabyte GPU with those like for likes. Now, In reality, it's not that easy, of course. The GPU, pretty big thing to ignore. In this case, though, ignoring it actually only really benefits the math or business enterprise. But also, the density is typically not the same. The RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell, for instance, that we took apart, uses 32 memory modules at a density of 3 gigabytes each, whereas the 5060 Ti Prime OCE torn down by Tech PowerUp uses 8 memory modules, 4 front and back, at a density of 2 gigabytes each. That's aside from the fact that data center often uses, again, HBM, which is potentially more area intensive after factoring in all associated wafer costs. But even still, the point still stands that there's a limit to wafer supply, especially when looking at it as it's processed through machines. And that means that you can make multiple consumer cards for every data center card that's produced. The problem is that the data centers are buying millions of these GPUs, and the margin is higher for those. And so what happens is, if you want consumer products to continue to exist, the companies are going to boost the margin on those by increasing their prices, which will siphon that money from you and fuck you over, while the data centers continue to buy up a lot of the supply, creating this feedback loop where you end up just perpetually increasing the price over time and driving the margins, sometimes quickly, up. Seeing this, it's no wonder that Micron, an Nvidia darling, decided to rake in billions of dollars of taxpayer money and then economically fuck the very taxpayers who paid them. Aside from polluting the land with construction of their new facilities, Micron's exit of the crucial consumer memory business means that there's less price suppression from a first-party source, which will stiff the consumers. There's also less supply of consumer memory in total. We think it's likely that Micron will reallocate as much of the consumer memory supply as it can, including to its partners, over to data center, despite whatever the corporate bootlickers online say about technically Micron only said it would exit the crucial memory business. In its fiscal quarter 4 25 earnings report from September, Micron stated on slide 38 that its cloud memory business unit, CMBU, had skyrocketed 257% year over year in revenue. Cloud memory revenue climbed from $3.79 billion in fiscal year 24 to $13.52 billion in fiscal year 25. Mobile and client went up only 2%, from $11.67 billion in fiscal year 24 to $11.86 billion in fiscal year 25. Micron defines its CMBU business as being, quote, focused on hyperscale customers and HBM for all data center customers, end quote. Further, Micron's most recent earnings, posted this week, revealed that its mobile and client business, which includes consumer products, increased its operating margin from 29% to 47% in just one quarter. You're paying for that. Micron's mobile and client business made up more than $4.2 billion in the last quarter, and yet Micron's cloud memory business made over $5.2 billion in revenue. Micron is making the most money with the highest margin with its AI products, and the company is jacking up the prices for consumers while padding its margins. In total, Micron made more than $13.6 billion in the quarter. Contributing to suspicions of a move to hardware as a service in alignment with unaffordable consumer hardware, we found that Nvidia has been updating its GeForce Now gaming subscription pages. If you haven't seen this before, Nvidia will let you subscribe to an RTX 4080 for $20 per month for 8-hour sessions at a time, with a maximum of 100 hours of playtime monthly. Although they hide that under the See More button, which seems like one hell of a dark pattern. For $240 per year, you can play games with, quote, typically no wait, asterisk, end quote. Unless, of course, a lot of people want to play, like when a new game comes out. The $10 per month tier doesn't even specify what GPU you'll get, just that it's GeForce RTX. Nvidia embraced the idea of renting hardware years ago with GeForce Now, its cloud gaming service. Nvidia launched GeForce Now with early access in 2017. It was previously called Grid, and the company opened up the service to more users in 2020. At the time, Nvidia said only a fraction of players, quote, have a modern PC with the power to play their favorite games, end quote, alluding to the high cost of its own GPUs. When, in the same blog, Nvidia said, quote, if you buy it, you own it, end quote, the company was referring to games, but missed the irony, seemingly, with subscribing to a GPU. In November 2024, Nvidia updated GeForce Now's terms and capped existing performance and ultimate tier members to 100 hours of gaming per month starting in January 2026. GeForce Now members could roll over 15 unused hours to the next month and purchase additional time in 15-hour blocks for up to $6. Additionally, in a blog from GTC 2025, Nvidia said GeForce Now allows developers to, quote, offload cloud-based AI inference, end quote, for games and integrate AI functions into games with, quote, minimal effort to reduce the minimum GPU requirements needed on the user's end, end quote. Nvidia also said GeForce Now has 35 data centers. Nvidia wants more people using AI features, whether you want it or not, and GeForce Now is another way to encourage or force AI feature adoption. With the January 2026 deadline to end unlimited playtime on GeForce Now approaching, a Reddit user charted playtime per month against how much it costs on GeForce Now. As the Reddit user said, quote, "The unshittification is obvious, and I don't want to be a part of it," unquote. We agree. The user's chart illustrates that a 5-year cost of the Ultimate tier, which is currently typically an RTX 4080, would actually cost the original, overpriced launch MSRP of an RTX 4080. $1,200. And that's assuming they don't ever change the price in that 5-year period. If you play games for 4 hours a day on average on that tier, or if you might have a family member who shares your account and combined you play 4 hours or more per day, then you'd be at almost $2,000 for 5 years. Personally, I was a shut-in no-lifer, I know, hard to believe, and played competitive games for 40 hours a week when I was in high school and had no responsibilities, like some sort of full-time job. So let's use that for fun. If a family of people, or a wannabe pro like me back in the day, ran that schedule, you'd be at 4 extra 15-hour blocks for another $24 per month. That'd be $44 per month, or over 5 years, about $2,600. A lot of you in our audience hold GPUs for 5 years or even more for the 1080 Ti users out there, but high prices, low availability, and a lease that looks cheap on the surface will ultimately slowly move people out of computer ownership, just like NZXT's approach to rentals. At 10 years, assuming no price changes ever, you'd be at $2,400 if playing under 4 hours per day on average on one account. You could even have days at 0 hours. That's still what it costs. We think it's clear what the strategy is. Selling a gaming GPU to a consumer is a one-time transaction. Selling a cloud gaming subscription could last years. People might forget to cancel it, and many people would use the same GPU over time. With GeForce Now, Nvidia gets to keep its hardware, encourage AI feature adoption, use its data centers that it's recklessly expanding with, charge people for cloud gaming services, and change the terms when it sees fit. This whole situation feels manufactured into an inescapable event horizon for subscription home computing. Again, the corporate apologists would argue that Micron and Nvidia are just doing what corporations should. They're making more money. That's what they should do. Line went up, therefore decision to fuck consumers good. We think that when AI companies are the beneficiaries of government handouts like tax breaks and deregulation to the tune of billions of dollars funded by taxpayers getting trampled by corporations daily, there's simply no excuse for this level of anti-consumer behavior, no matter how free market you are and how much you want to support. Companies make money good, therefore nothing else matters. Broadly speaking, we think that the AI industry and its associated data center development is not only anti-consumer, but has become anti-humanity in the sense that its feckless build-out and expansion and its push for government deregulation is now leading to things like not only increased consumer pricing, which is we're not entitled to good prices, but also to things like less stringent zoning, where people are getting fucked by creative interpretation of ancient regulations and zoning in areas, and an increase in pollution, where in some regions there are reports of increases in diagnoses of things like COPD and other diseases. This AI industry is crushing everything in its path underfoot. It will crush the neighbors of the reckless expansion of data centers. It will pollute. It's crushing fragile ecosystems, especially those in the water. It'll crush people who already struggle to afford electricity, and those people will now be footing the bill to subsidize the expansion of the very data centers that will further increase their cost of electricity and create a feedback loop again to further fuck them over. And it'll crush users of consumer devices like GPUs or like memory that are found in the case of memory, everything. This isn't a gaming computer problem. This isn't a DIY enthusiast build PCs problem. This is an everybody problem. Big businesses can outbid you and then lease it back to you later. We're seeing some parallels here to the housing market, where private equity can create a positive feedback loop that benefits itself because buying homes takes homes off the market. That increases the cost of homes. That puts more people into rentership, which increases the cost of rent because there are fewer homes on the market and more people are renting those homes. And in that case, private equity just maintains control over it and continues to snowball that. Revenue is a lot more stable if you can lease and rent people a bunch of shit instead of selling it to them outright. We see that with NZXT and with Fragile, with the rental computer program as a direct parallel. Private equity and these large companies can outbid anybody, anytime. And in the case of housing, they can just turn housing into money and make that a perpetual cash flow cycle. In the case of what we're talking about today, we think the same thing is happening with computers, where the dream once might have been to own a home, and maybe that dream got adjusted to, well, I'll just try and buy a nice car instead. That gets adjusted for some people to, I'll just buy a nice computer, I can afford that. People will continually adjust to what they think is achievable. Maybe it's a nice computer in the instance of a lot of people in our audience, and they adjust their ambitions. But now, private equity and these large companies want to make sure that you not only rent your home and lease your car, but subscribe to your computer. All of that is without acknowledging that many of these data center parts have no secondhand market usefulness to the vast majority of consumers. As these GPUs depreciate, they'll end up in landfills, or maybe, if we're lucky, they'll go to other AI users that buy secondhand. Data center and AI greed has gone beyond simply fucking consumers, and instead is now intent on fucking humanity, with things like the Palantir partnership, with things like the focus on military applications of AI, because apparently there's not enough money in the private sector. We need to go extract it from the Pentagon as well. And even for the people who like LLMs, if you're in our audience, you're like, yeah, but I like LLMs and I have local AI, local LLMs, whatever that I use for processing. Even for those people, or maybe especially, these companies are trying to bid you out of the market so that you can't own that shit, so you have to subscribe to theirs instead. And right now, the data center focus is on LLMs and so-called AI use cases, but long-term, we think that the focus, as we said in the last piece, is on making sure you can't own anything, and you'll have to subscribe to everything. And unfortunately, for as powerful as voting with your wallet is, for every Meta that buys 1.3 million GPUs, that is at least 1.3 million consumers who would have to not buy one instead. And honestly, even if you have the power of consumers boycotting at that level to counteract the purchase, the thing is, we think it might actually make it worse to do so because it further consolidates that power. The companies are post-consumer. They do not need you right now. They are passing money back and forth between each other. The way they'll get the money from you is by getting tax breaks, tax incentives, cuts on property taxes like Micron just got, getting the grid upfit for itself and for its own use by passing that cost on to everybody who lives nearby who will be paying for it. They are going to extract the money from things like the CHIPS Act to fund their corporate customers rather than benefiting normal people, and all of that is going to come from you. They'll then sell subscriptions to you of their LLMs, their software, and their cloud computing. And when you can't afford that anymore, they'll sell AI facial recognition software to department stores that will use it to employ discriminatory pricing against you based on your purchasing demands and how desperate they think you are. And they'll push the pricing to just the level that is at the threshold where you break and you lose it. That is going to be how this goes. There's already evidence of, for what I'm calling, price discrimination, and that discrimination is based on things like the willingness of the consumer and their purchasing behaviors, which may not be a protected class by legal definitions, so they can discriminate on those things, and they can adjust pricing based on you when you walk in the store, you stand in front of the shelf for 5 minutes, walk away, and later bombard you with ads and try to adjust the price subtly to make you buy it. This is going to take a lot of credentialed people to solve. This is a big problem. It is not just DIY PC enthusiasts that we're talking about. This is like, it's not only a bubble. And when this shit pops, and it will, it's gonna fuck a lot of people who aren't Jensen Huang or Lisa Su or Sam Altman or Lip Bhutan. It's gonna be everybody else. And it's not just because computers will be difficult to build and buy for a reasonable price. When we posted our Micron piece, someone criticized us for not offering a solution to this problem. I'm not that powerful. I appreciate that someone thinks that. But I will play ball. I've been silently in communication with people from congressional committees since our AI GPU Black Market series, and I've raised this issue and others to them. It's not much, I'm not that powerful, but I've at least made some ground with congressional staff in terms of educating them on what companies don't tell them. There are people who seem to care who are working for elected officials, and I've been talking with a couple of those people. It's not a lot, It might not go anywhere, but it's also not a problem that GN alone can solve. It's not really what we do. I'm not an expert in it. I have no idea what the fuck I'd be doing in that realm of things. But hey, I tried to get the ball rolling, and there's at least some people now in sort of government positions who are asking us our opinion on a couple of different things related to this. So this is going to take a lot of people to address. This is, the problem is bigger than us. We have no delusions that we can do anything about it. But if you're someone who's connected politically and knows how to fight for people on these types of issues, you are welcome to email us and see if maybe we can collaborate or do something together or whatever. Maybe we can kind of point some of this energy somewhere. I can't do that alone, though. I don't know what I would be doing in that space. So you can email tips@gamersnexus.net if you'd like to do that. That is not my area of expertise. I am open to hearing from people, though. All right. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. You can go to store.gamersnexus.net to support this type of reporting directly or patreon.com/gamersnexus. We'll see you all next time.